You've come to the right place for the ultimate preview. It is BYU. It is Texas Tech, the Big 12 championship game, and a spot or two in the college football playoff on the line. This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making this show your first listen every single day. And if you don't, it's probably because Locked On Cougars or Locked On Texas Tech are your first listen every single day. And there they are, Jake Hatch and Chris Level joining the show. We will start with every reason that BYU will win. Even Level has a couple keys to the game for the Cougars. But then why not spend 8 minutes talking about Texas Tech, the most dominant team in the Big 12, and their keys to victory? I don't know about keys to victory, just the things they have to keep doing, the things that they'll continue to do to win this game. And finally, this is the biggest Big 12 championship game since Texas and OU played 5, 6, 7 seasons ago. And last year's Iowa State, Arizona State half full, quarter full stadium is a thing of the past. The Big 12 will get premier viewership, premier publicity from these two teams. If you hit subscribe, we get to keep our jobs. Let's open it up first and foremost. Hatch, I've talked a lot about it on the show. We've hinted on it in the squad, a ton of conversation. A brief synopsis over what you've heard about Kalani Sitake staying at BYU and your reaction to that situation.
They kept him home, and they beat a blue blood in Penn State to do just that. The Penn State stuff, no matter what people may say, it was real. And Kalani Sitake did have some interest with regards to looking at that opportunity. But to BYU's credit, they got their boosters aligned, they got the administration aligned, and they got Kalani Sitake's deal across the line. He's here to stay, and it sure looks like, for all intents and purposes, he's going to be a lifer at BYU. And I think that's a great move for the university.
Level, I'll give you a shot here before we jump into the game. You mentioned on the squad show that releases Thursday, this is good overall for the Big 12, Kalani staying at BYU. Why is that?
Well, I think the coaches are X's and O's guys, or they're recruiters, or they're motivational guys. I mean, and then the good ones are all the above. But it's really about fit. When you find a really good coach, I mean, Jake can speak to it better than I can, but from afar, there's just no better fit than the guy. He's very good friends with Joey McGuire. I just think he is everything about what the Big 12 and BYU is, right? And I appreciated his comments in the Big 12 championship game press conference about, hey, man, we appreciate being in this league. Everybody has been great to us, and this is fun for us. This is what we had hoped to be. And I know, 3 or 4 years ago, it was kind of a bit shaky. There's been nobody better in the last, 2.5 seasons than the BYU Cougars in this league. And I think it would have not looked good for the Big 12 had he left. And it's no fault of the Big 12s or even BYU's. If this is what he wanted to do, he would have been allowed to go do it. And they had interest, but he had some leverage and he used it. Good for him. And now he's in a much better spot now in Provo.
Yeah, there are schools with real money in this conference. I think that is something that is lost a lot of times when we talk about the Big 12. Brands that have the dough to pony it up and compete with Penn State. BYU just did that. Level, we'll keep it with you. If the statement is BYU just won the Big 12 championship, that would mean for the conference, 2 teams in the college football playoff. It is the most advantageous thing for Brett Yormark and this league overall. But Texas Tech wants to win. There is no die on a sword to help the league, obviously. But if BYU does win, what happened?
I think you turned it over too many times. I think that you had some, too many pre-snap penalties and some of the things that Texas Tech has fallen into a bit this season. They've been able to live and to tell about it and outlasted teams. But, and the thing about this game is, and this probably holds true for both teams, this is going to be a very, very big stage. The lights will be bright. And if we're just all assuming that everybody will do what they've done and be the same that they've been, and they won't be a 21-year-old kid and look up at the big jumbotron too much and kind of get caught. I mean, that's the beauty of sports. And so something uncharacteristic will go on here, and that could happen to either side. But if it's a Texas Tech loss, it probably because you couldn't take care of the football and because the referees got involved and you false starts and holding or whatever it may be. So that would be my recipe for BYU.
Hatch, my favorite stat I brought up when it comes to trying to give BYU a reason to win, or talking about how the Cougars can strike. Obviously, 3 fumbles or 3 turnovers, that muffed punt, not good in the first game. Texas Tech, 5 field goals is good. BYU's defense in the red zone. And I also point to the big play. Like Cameron Dickey, his long was 33 yards. Williams, his long was 43 yards on the ground. That's a combined 76 yards. That's half, on 2 carries, half of Texas Tech's ground game. You limit those 2 big plays, we're talking about a different game, at least from the scoreboard standpoint. Maybe it's only 17-7, but still you're losing. What all has to flip? Because it's got to be pretty dramatic for BYU to win.
Well, let's put it this way. That day in Lubbock, and I think I think, Chris, and you would agree with this, Drake, one phase of the 3 phases of football showed up for BYU in that game, and that was their defense. The offense and special teams absolutely crippled BYU's chances in that game. And I think that if those 2 phases, even if they show up a little bit, we'll have a far more competitive game. I'm not saying that BYU is going to win, but the thing is they have to have the offense at least generate something more than what they did in simply garbage time. They crossed the 50 for the first time in the third quarter. You've got to find a way to generate offense. And I think the BYU, they babied Behren Bachmeier in that game against Lubbock. A lot of max protect that really did not give them a fighting chance. LJ Martin was nowhere near 100%. Now he's not 100% yet. That shoulder is still messed up, but he is far more effective right now going into this game. And oh, by the way, some kid by the name of Sione Moa may rejoin the lineup for the first time since the ECU game before they entered Big 12 play. So there are weapons that BYU is re-adding to the mix here, and I hope that BYU has a better performance, especially offensively.
Yeah, if I'm BYU, I may flip the script. You look, they're going to want to establish the run game early, right? This is what they do. LJ Martin's going to touch this ball, 20 to 30 times. Okay. I mean, that's just he's going to, get it thrown to him. He's going to carry it, all that stuff.
Yeah. He had 36 against Cincinnati, and they will give it as many times as they feel like.
Yeah, right. And that's Texas Tech's strength. They're one of the best teams in the country at stopping the run. What if they just drop back and start throwing it down the field early and say, screw it. Like we're going to take some chances. And I think Texas Tech is expecting Behren Bachmeier to kind of turn it loose and all that. And now what does that equal? I don't know. But I think that you kind of could see some script flipped here a bit from your attack. I can tell you that Texas Tech will also try to throw the ball down the field too. They felt like there was way too much left out there trying to throw the ball that they didn't. That BYU plays a lot of man coverage. Texas Tech felt like they didn't take advantage of most of those opportunities. 2 of 7 in the red zone as far as scoring touchdowns, the 5 field goals, and then 1 red zone opportunity, you come up with nothing. Because of 2 drops. I mean, passes right in Coy Aiken and Terrence Carter's hands and just dropped it. And you end up with 0 points, which I wondered at the time, was like, ooh, that might sting, but it didn't.
Well, and Chris, to your point, I think you look at that ASU game, and yes, I've had a lot of Texas Tech fans say that, well, Behren Morton didn't play in the game. He doesn't play defense. So here's the deal. If you watch what ASU did, they essentially told the ASU offense, you've essentially got 2 seconds to get that ball out of Levitt's hands, and that's exactly what they did, and it was effective. I think that they'll go into this game, speaking of BYU, put 4 and 5 wides out there and tell Bear, you maybe have 2.5 seconds, or David Bailey or Mello Height is going to be eating your lunch, but you got to get that ball out of your hands. You got to make your reads and get that ball flying out of your hands, because I'm right. I feel like that's the right way to approach this game. You got to, as you mentioned, flip the script here and try something completely different.
This is great chatter, but Texas Tech did win by 22 points. So let's make the case, and you don't really have to, for Tech to win this game. Up next, Locked on Big 12, Locked on Cougars, Locked on Texas Tech. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. You can go to FanDuel right now. Download the FanDuel app, the most convenient way to get in on the action in all of sports. And look, I think the 13.5, 14-point spread between BYU and Texas Tech is too many, in my opinion. I think the ball bounces a couple ways back to BYU on a neutral site. And yeah, Texas Tech may win by 3, 7, 10, no doubt, but they cover. BYU covers 14, 13.5, 13 at FanDuel. Every weekend moves fast. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Live spreads, money lines that adjust instantly. If you want to have you, yourself, I, me, any of us in the middle of the action, all you have to do is go to FanDuel.com and place live bets on college football, the NFL, or pregame bets on BYU and Texas Tech. At FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you with FanDuel. Chris Level of Locked On Texas Tech, Jake Hatch of Locked On Cougars. Hatch, I gave this one to Level first in talking about BYU. I'll pitch it to you for Texas Tech. 29-7, 22-point win. Do you change anything, or is this? It just feels weird to say what are the keys to victory for Texas Tech when they showed they're the dominant team.
Well, essentially, just do exactly what you did and shut down BYU's offense. Hope the special teams has a bad day for BYU and win the game. Now, turnover margin always plays a pivotal role in this game. And if Tech takes care of the football and turns BYU over a few times, yeah, that's a recipe for disaster. And that should lend itself to Texas Tech winning this game. I'm under no illusions from this BYU side of things that Texas Tech is not maybe the best team top to bottom that I've seen in quite some time in the Big 12 Conference since BYU joined the league, at least in general. And they are really a formidable unit, and trying to take them down is going to be a struggle for BYU. But I think just Tech, have the mindset you're going to do the exact same thing you did in Lubbock and go out there and play ball.
Level, I mentioned this with Coach Gary Patterson last week when Alabama and Auburn played. Bama's a much better team, but there was this weird mystique around the game that maybe Auburn wins. And a lot of folks felt like Auburn could catch up to Bama and make the rivalry game interesting. Level, it doesn't feel like, to me, the aura around this matchup is that, Texas Tech might slip to BYU. It still feels as though there is one team in clear control of this conference.
I mean, I think that a lot of people assume that Texas Tech, like to what you were just saying about the FanDuel stuff. I mean, they may win, they may not cover. It may be closer than it was before. To Jake's point, I mean, this is easily the best team that I think Texas Tech saw all season. Utah was very good at the time. Then the dam broke. And then based on what I saw from Utah late in the season with their inability to stop the run. But I think that the red zone issues that Texas Tech had, which this is all they're talking about here in Lubbock, is how bad we were in the red zone. How do we get that fixed? Let's come up with this. We've got to execute that. And this is unacceptable. And if we're going to go further and we want to do these things that, past the Big 12, you've got to get this fixed. But BYU had a lot to do with that. BYU's linebackers, Jack Kelly and Glasker and those guys are real dudes, man. And they made life very difficult for Texas Tech when the space was condensed. So I think if you're holding Texas Tech to field goals, this thing could get interesting again, because that game was – Texas Tech was largely in control in Lubbock for the better part of the game, but they never were able to totally separate and run off. And they were trying to do that when Joey decided to kind of go for the throat at the end of the half. We're going to go for the touchdown. We're going to try to make them change their game plan. This is what he told me coming off the field in our sideline interview. Like, hey, coach, it's an awkward question for me. Like, you wish you'd have kicked it there. He's like, no, we wanted to try to go for the touchdown because we wanted to see if they would have to change their game plan, and we get it. You end up with nothing, and you let BYU hang in there simply because you couldn't convert in the red zone. So to me, it in theory, we were talking about, would you flip the script and let Bachmeier kind of spread it out? And I don't know if that's what he is. I think you have to do that in spurts. I don't know if there's if you could do this and do it continuously. At some point, they will want to run the ball. This is what they do. This is what they're good at. It's just not a good matchup for BYU as far as that aspect of this game goes. If Texas Tech does what they have done all year, there's no guarantee that they will. But that part of it and kind of how this freshman quarterback plays is fascinating to me, because he could be the biggest star coming out of the game, on Saturday about 3:00. I mean, there's just no doubt. And everybody will probably pick BYU to win the whole thing next year if he has a really monster game and he's the reason why they won it. But I think at some point he is going to have to make a lot of plays for them to win this game, and he might be able to do it. We'll see.
Well, and Chris, to your point, that's what BYU, they won't get away from their identity. Now they're going to try and establish the run with LJ Martin, and if Sione Moa is capable of going, that's a nice 1-2 tandem. They're going to try and soften up that Texas Tech front. And they had some success early on in that game in Lubbock running the football. They got to sustain that, and I think with a healthier LJ Martin and, like I said, Moa maybe potentially being available. But you're right. There are going to have to be times. You cannot, on passing downs like BYU did in Lubbock, have 7-man max protect to make sure that Bachmeier stays upright. You just can't do that. You got to tell him you have got 5 versus 4, so you're going to have 5 offensive linemen versus 4 defensive linemen, and those 4 defensive linemen are going to beat our offensive line in 2, maybe 3 seconds max, Bear. Get that ball out of your hands. You got to make maybe 1-2 checks, throw the ball away. They're going to, yeah, you're right. You can't go wholesale, completely change your entire offensive identity for this game alone, but you can change a few things. I think it's especially in the passing game where you have to kind of go for broke and throw it down the field.
I would still be surprised if we don't see Parker Kingston or Chase Roberts carry the ball 2 or 3 times apiece. I think A-Rod will have to go at some level. You're looking at kitchen sink here, understanding your shot at playing for a national championship is still alive. You have to, if you want to establish the run, be super creative without turning the ball over. And we've seen A-Rod be very creative in situations where he didn't need to be, in situations where it didn't need, like, where did the double reverse come from? We're up by 10. We've seen that for BYU this season, Jake.
Well, and that's the thing about this. They've run that tornado reverse play that has been really effective, and it was really effective early in the season. But remember, they ran it, I think it was 2 home games ago, and it got blown up. So it's
on film.
Yeah, it's on film. It's been scouted. But you have something else. You have something else in that bag of tricks that you can deploy in this game. I fully expect BYU to try and find something. And they call them a gadget play, a special, whatever you want to call it. BYU will have to deploy 1 or 2 of those, it feels like, if they want to pull this off.
We'll be right back. Now, this is all good and welcome for a Cincinnati fan, a Houston fan, an Arizona fan of wondering, like, why do I care? I think the reason that I care is because we're looking at 2 teams, 2 fan bases, the exposure the Big 12 has not had in at least a few years, especially in this new format. This is Locked On Big 12, Locked On Cougars, and Locked On Texas Tech. Right back to you, Jake Hatch of Locked On Cougars, Chris Level of Locked On Texas Tech. Level, you've covered this conference for a long time. Texas and OU played a few years ago in the Big 12 championship game. You got Red River all over again, but it wasn't for a spot in the national championship like it is here. It wasn't a spot for the college football playoff like it is here. Both of these teams this time next week can understand they're playing for glory at the top of this sport. Is this the biggest championship game we've seen in the Big 12 in a long time?
Yeah, and it's kind of a perfect storm in some ways because this reminds me of the NFL version of what the NFL got with the Cowboys and the Chiefs on Thanksgiving Day, in that you have brands, you have interests, you have celebrity, you have good teams that are trying to fight in the playoffs in that instance. But in this case, there's going to be people that are tuning into this game nationally because they're rooting either for BYU or for Texas Tech for how it affects their team. So there's very much of a national relevant component here on who wins, by how much, all that kind of stuff. But there's just no way anybody can deny that these were the 2 best teams in the league. I mean, it's a combined, 22-2. And so, and we know BYU's a national brand. I think people have been following Texas Tech and kind of this ascent and are intrigued by how good this team could be. Texas Tech, this is shocking that I'm going to say this, but Texas Tech has a legit chance to compete for a national championship. I don't know if they're good enough to win it. I really don't. I don't know if they're good enough to win a game in the playoff. But if you look at what they've done and you look at what these other teams that are supposedly in the field, they belong in those conversations. And so I don't know where it goes from here, but I think it's and it's frustrating that BYU is not already in. That sickens me. It's not right. But this is apparently what the committee is saying.
Chris, there's obviously the sickos of college football out there. There's this parlay out there that say, like, okay, so Duke's playing for an ACC title. They're 7-5, guys. If they win that game and win the ACC, they're likely not getting into the playoff.
James Madison
and Tulane or North Texas, whoever wins the American, you have two G5 or G6 teams getting into the playoff field. And if BYU wins, that would thereby put two Big 12 teams in. Drake, we're going to watch the SEC and the ACC melt down with the so-called lesser bands in the field if this goes down. There's a parlay out there of this that I'm sure you get pretty good odds on from our friends at FanDuel.
Yeah.
Keep an eye on that, because you talk about the sickos behavior, that's what you're rooting for. And that's why some people maybe tune in to watch BYU play this game.
Yeah, I'm sure Kalshi has something on it. Hatch, you know a thing or two about Kalshi over there.
Hey, I learned about Kalshi over the past weekend. I had no idea what it was. I learned very quickly what it's all about.
So that's where, I think level, as somebody myself who's covered the Big 12 for going on 8 years now, and that's not near as long as you have, but in those 8 years, you've seen the college football playoff develop into what it is, and the Big 12 conference try to compete for a national championship, and no one's won a game outside of TCU, which still feels kind of random. There's that one-off. The year prior, they were bad enough to fire the coach. The year after, they missed a bowl game. And so your one win in the playoff all time it feels like fluke's not the right word, because they deserve to beat Michigan, but it's different. It wasn't OU. It wasn't a powerful Oklahoma State or a Kansas State that develops. But now for you, Hatch, we're talking about a year where you brought in a quarterback from Stanford who's a true freshman. Like McKay Hillstead's, you're going to be your starter because the other quarterback had premarital relations with a woman that turns out possibly consensual. You lose your senior quarterback. You go to the freshman who misses spring ball. It's going to be McKay Hillstead. It's not McKay Hillstead anymore. By the way, in the middle of all this, Rob Wright shows up, right? You're already going through controversies in basketball of now we're a basketball school. We're focusing on AJ DeBonson and how that, the 2025 for BYU, AD change, has been storyline after storyline. Then your head coach leaves in the middle of the week before the Big 12 title game and comes back to BYU. All of that, I think, culminates into what might be the biggest BYU singular sporting event in school history. It's probably the biggest game, at least since 1984, in a Holiday Bowl that ultimately clinched BYU their only national title in football. It is 41 years in the making here, and it's not lost on me, Drake, that this is a moment that BYU needs to seize, if at all possible, because they have had aspirations quite literally decades since they hoisted that national championship in 1984 of being on this stage. That means having a legit possibility to play for a national title. I'm with Chris. If BYU does find a way to make it into the playoff field, I'm under no illusions that I would consider them to be maybe a national title contender. I'm not even sure they'll even get out of the first round, but they simply want to be able to knock on that door, kick it down, whatever term you want to use, and play for the darn thing. And that's what they're chasing right now.
Yeah, I mean, this is the biggest game for BYU, though, in a month, really.
Oh, absolutely. No doubt.
Because that was the first, was that not the first game against the top 10 team opponent ever?
It's top 10 versus top 10. So BYU.
Top 10 matchup. That's what I meant to say.
Exactly. They never played a top 10 versus top 10 matchup. That was history in Lubbock, obviously. And Chase Roberts said after the game, we're going to be back in this place again. And Chase spoke after the Kalani Sitake presser. And I asked him the question. I'm like, hey, some people thought you were maybe being a little over the top with saying that we're going to be back in this. And he's like, no, we manifested it. We knew we were going to be back in this game. And I think I respect him speaking out as vociferously as he did on that point, and he manifested it. They're here back on this stage, and they've got to do everything. I mean, everything within their power to win this game, because I'm with Chris. I don't get why the playoff committee hates BYU, because that's exactly what it appears it is, but they've got to knock down this door to get in the field.
Yeah, I think BYU has also proven if you want a brand, if the problem is viewership, if it is support, BYU has that. Like, I feel much more confident. Actually, it sounds super, super weird, but I have more confidence in BYU fans traveling to Phoenix than I do A&M fans. And A&M will travel. It's not me trying to dock A&M here, but I've seen what BYU fans can do. They just overthrew Penn State. Like, I wouldn't start doubting what you will get from an exposure standpoint by allowing BYU to be in this spot. You know, I'll rephrase that, actually. I think A&M fans would show up. Alabama fans would not show up in Phoenix like BYU fans would. I've been to games in Tuscaloosa. They're not like that.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this much, Drake. The valley down there in Arizona, there's a huge huge contingent of BYU fans, members of the Christ Latter-day Saints. They have certain restaurants that only exist in Utah. The only restaurant of those that exist outside of Utah happen to be in the valley down there in Arizona, like Mesa and that surrounding area. So they would have a huge influx.
And the same goes if you say, hey, BYU's playing in D.C. Like, well, we've got 40,000 alum in D.C. You know, there's just something about it.
The entire East Coast wing of the Mormon Church will show up.
It's nuts to me. And Level, we'll end the show with you briefly here. Texas Tech loses. The Big 12 gets 2 in. Again, Brett Yormark has an obvious rooting interest here for the conference to get 2 teams in the playoff. It's going to be millions more dollars for the league. If Tech loses, does it dilute at all what the Red Raiders could do in the college football playoff? Because they will obviously be in despite a loss.
Yeah, I think they'll be in. I think they're so high now that they, depending on how they would lose, if that's what we're talking about, you still may be in a position to host.
I think so, yeah.
And it's a weird spot to be in, like when, and you could go back to AT&T on New Year's Eve. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's almost like a perfect storm. I've talked to somebody at the Cotton Bowl offices, and I think that there's some regionality, and they want the CFP to be this. That they have definitely got their eyes on Texas Tech, but I don't know if it would do. I mean, you would have to go play an extra game. We were talking 2 or 3 weeks ago, like, hey man, do you want to host a playoff game or do you want to buy? Like, what if you could pick it, and all that stuff, and so. I mean, I don't know. This is all so foreign. I mean, this is not like the fact that we're sitting here talking about, I mean, so you would have to host a playoff game. I mean, like, how would you feel about, I mean, like, are you kidding me? I mean, this is uncharted territory, man, for all the above, for BYU too. BYU's never been in a conference championship game, right?
No, they've played in 2.
Okay, 2. Okay.
1996 and 1998 when the old WAC was 16 teams.
See, okay, got it. Okay, so Power 4 league though. This is different. But yeah, been a minute. So this is a lot of fun, and I will say this too: the atmosphere in that stadium on Saturday morning will be big time. It will be big time.
That's and I saw this. The Baylor Oklahoma State was huge, and those are 2 fan bases that have been we have really gone through the murk the last few years. These are 2 fan bases that are as excited as ever because they have a shot at a college football playoff and national championship. I don't think anybody's rooting harder for BYU than the Texas Tech PA guy. I guess for one more game in Lubbock, baby. One more playoff game with the PA guy gets. I've been there.
You know who the PA guy is, right?
No, who's the PA guy?
Casey Cowan, my co-host.
No kidding. That's who it is.
Not.
Yeah, I swear.
No way.
Yes.
Yeah,
he is. He has just finished his 2nd season as the Texas Tech PA announcer. So yeah,
wow.
1,000% breaking news.
Oh my God!
And another Red Raider. First down. That's my man, Cowan.
Well, on your behalf, Casey Cowan, I guess we'll all root for BYU. If that's what he wants. That's unbelievable. Yeah. Chris Level at Chris Level on Twitter, and Jake Hatch at Jacob C. Hatch. They are Locked On Cougars, Locked On Texas Tech, Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making our shows your first listen every single day. This has been, and always will be, a crossover Locked On Texas Tech, Cougars, and Dose Grande.